So welcome, can everyone see, hopefully everyone can see my presentation. So yeah, thank you for attending our Roadshow webinar. The very first Roadshow webinar, obviously due to coronavirus, we were unable to have our official series this year. But yeah, really glad to be able to bring this to you. Thank you for your patience. It's with us setting up this new technology, but we're pretty excited to be able to deliver all the updates, and then hopefully in 2021 we'll be back to the normal seminars. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. For this, I believe everybody's already on mute and video off, but if you can keep it that way, it just helps with the internet in case anyone's streaming this from regional or somewhere with bad internet. If you do have any questions, please use the Q&A box on your control panel. And if we sort of get to a point where there's just too many questions, or are there any detailed questions, we might just need you to contact the presenter directly. Each presenter will provide their details, so if we get to that point, we'll let you know. But yeah, if you have any sort of quick and easy questions as we go, please pop them in there and we'll endeavour to get back to you. We've also got quite a few copies of the lovely Roadshow handout, which we did print before we had to cancel. So if you are keen to grab a copy of those, which has all the slides in it as per normal, feel free to come into the office anytime, pick one up. We're still located at 213 Green Hill Road. We have moved offices, however, into the front tenancy, so you'll find us in Tenancy 1. So yeah, we've got plenty of copies of those, so you can come in and pick one up. And alternatively, if you are in the regions, we can post one out to you as well. Just let us know. And we are recording this webinar, and should double check we're recording it. Actually, yep, we are. And the video will be made available next week on our website for everyone to access. So this year's roadshows were actually very well supported, as every year we are. So big thanks to those sponsors who had signed up for the roadshows. Hopefully most of those will be back next year. But as per usual, we appreciate if you support them in return. And if you're interested in any of their services, please feel free to contact me for their details and I can pass them on. Now, we have applied for the solar accreditation scheme. I don't know as yet how many points it'll be, hopefully around the usual 30 to 40 mark. Yeah, so I put in the application, and if you do need the points for that, please email us, NECA at necasa.asn.au, and we'll provide you with a letter of attendance for the webinar. So what I'm going to do is just run through a bit of the latest work we've been doing for the benefit of our members and obviously those who may not be members and like to know a little bit about what we've been up to. And then I'll pass on to Martin at SA Power Networks after that, and he will present his updates to the service and installation rules. And then after that, Alex is going to talk from the OTR and deliver their updates. So yeah, so just to run through briefly what NECA have been up to lately. Been obviously a very busy few months with coronavirus. We've done a lot of work helping members with various resources and documentation, advice, particularly when everything first hit. We were really busy getting all of that out to members. So hopefully we've been able to support you and your business throughout this challenging time. And yeah, if anyone has any questions or needs further support, please contact us anytime. That's what we're here for. And we've obviously done a lot of work nationally as well to really try and make sure the building and construction industry has been able to continue to work and to be able to work safely. So yeah, we've been doing a lot with the various government bodies and industry bodies as well. So a lot of that information, we've actually got a COVID-19 page on our website, which you can find on the home screen. So if you are interested to know what we've been up to, you can head there and check it out. We've been doing some work with the Security Payment Act, which is obviously the act that tries to ensure that you guys get paid. So there's been submissions made regarding the latest changes, and we're in the process of developing a brand new security payment comprehensive guide and book, I guess, which we're getting help from lawyers and barristers on. So hopefully, obviously coronavirus put a bit of hold on that. So hopefully that'll be out later this year. Specialist Contractors SA, I'm sure you will have heard me talk about this over the last couple of years. This is an association that we formed with other associations. So I guess it's an association for associations. So it's really about representing the subcontractor industry in South Australia. So it's ourselves, master plumbers, the air conditioning mechanical contractors, the fire industry association, the Australian Subcontractor Association, and I think the master painters is about to join as well. So essentially we look at, the biggest thing we do is look at all the unfair contract terms that particularly builders are placing on our members, and what we can do about it. So we're gaining some real traction with government and everything, and a lot of work is happening in the background. And we've actually just moved offices for, I think some of the members will know this. So we're, like I said, we're at the same location, but we've actually moved into a bigger tenancy, and Master Plumbers Association and the Air Conditioning Mechanical Contractors Association have moved in with us. So essentially this will be like the little hub of specialist contractors here, and we're really looking forward to working closely with them as we have been in the past, but it will be able to be bigger and better moving forward now that we're all in the same office. Yeah, to just collaborate on things like that and have a stronger voice to the government and really support you guys with trying to get those unfair contract terms made illegal, essentially. Some of you may be aware that there is a new training package on its way, has been on its way for a while. It's a big job, as you can probably imagine. So our Executive Director, Larry Moore, is the chair of this group that is undertaking the work. So I believe it's all going fairly well, but yeah, big job. I'm not actually sure when it's all coming out. Hopefully next year, I think. So yeah, that's something we're heavily involved in, which is good. Something else that we started early this year was a Crucial Women in Construction group. So this also involves master plumbers and AMCA, and we are starting to form a bit of a committee, and we're going to run events for women in the industry and really promote all the women who do fantastic work within the industry, but also trying to look at ways to get more women into the industry, more apprentices, female apprentices, and things like that. So yeah, so that's going really well. We're really, we had our first event earlier this year, and it sold out in 5 days, which was fantastic. And we are looking at another event later this year, hopefully November. And then this high tea that we run, that's going to become an annual thing around International Women's Day every year. So yeah, so we're really excited about that new initiative. Another thing we've been up to is some business management workshops are scheduled for later this year. It's unknown as yet whether they'll be face-to-face or webinar, might be a mix of both. So with the restrictions easing, we should be able to run some seminars for those who are keen to do the face-to-face stuff. Yeah, so there's a website there that you can book through. So Ray Hodge is a business consultant. He's fantastic. He runs seminars for us all the time and really knowledgeable. So yeah, if you're interested in sort of some business management tips and things like that, jump in there and have a look. The other thing we were going to talk about at the Roadshow this year was the launch of our HSEQ Digital, which, if you are interested in this product, there is a comprehensive video of our HSEQ manager on our website. And he's talking about this product, but essentially it's taken our HSEQ management system and put it into a digital format. So it's a really efficient software. There's an app on your phone and then a program on your computer, in the cloud, sorry. And you can have a bit like job management software, you can have your guys out on site signing swims and things like that, and then you controlling everything from the office as well. So it's a really, really great product, and we're super excited about it because it's something we've been wanting to have for a little while, a digital version. So, and there is also a HSE digital small business pack for those who don't need the full system. And perhaps just need something a little bit smaller to get them through the WHS requirements. And yeah, so if you're interested at all, please feel free to contact me, or if you've got our safety manager's details, you can contact him direct. Yeah, we hope that we can get some more people on it. We only released it, I think, about a month ago. So yeah, really excited about that new product. The other exciting program that we're working on at the moment is we're trying to get some Skilling SA funding, which is done through the state government, to start a bit of a electrical industry career pathway. So it's become pretty evident to us over many, many years that there is nothing in Australia, definitely, but in South Australia, there's nothing that sort of, after your apprenticeship, there's really nothing to support you to go from apprentice to tradesperson to leading hand, supervisor, estimator, construction manager, general manager. So we're pretty passionate about trying to find a pathway and some training around that. So we've actually started that process with TAFE. And we're working on putting some courses together and having it run through TAFE and getting some Skilling SA funding for us to commence that. So that's pretty cool. We're really, really happy about that. It's actually something that Larry has been working on for like 20 years. It's a big project, but yeah, it'd be really great for the industry if we can get something like that going. So stay tuned for that. The other thing that probably a lot of you know is that the switchboard standard is officially changing, I believe, next year, and it's sort of been a 5-year process. So we have been in discussions with LAI switchboards to run a bit of a seminar. So obviously COVID did put a hold on all of that, but hopefully we'll be able to bring something to you later this year on that. So there's some significant changes, I've been told, and which will affect our members and electrical contractors in working in any industry, I guess, across Australia. So yeah, stay tuned for that as well. And the last thing that I just want to make note of is a new sort of group that I've joined is SA Power Networks Connections Working Group. This group is made up of electrical contractors, solar and energy consultants, ourselves and master electricians, and of course SA Power Networks, essentially looking at the inefficiencies of connections processes in South Australia. So if you ever have any problems with any of that connections process, please come and have a chat to me, and I can take it to the group. And we've also, as part of that, we've developed a metering subgroup, which will look at the problems that have arisen from the whole power of choice metering contestability changes that happened a couple of years ago. And yeah, so obviously we're not overly happy with how it has progressed, and it's as you would all know, it's been a massive headache. And yeah, so it's something that we're pretty keen to try and get it sort of sorted out one way or another. So yeah, being on those two groups gives us a voice on all of that, gives our members a voice. So like I said, if you've got problems, questions, queries, you run into issues with any of those things, please give me a call or an email, and I'll endeavour to help you out. So that's, there's probably a lot more, I mean, there is a lot more that we've been doing, but I guess that's some of the real relevant stuff to our members and to the industry that you guys will be interested in. Like I said, if you are a member, please contact us anytime with your queries. That's what we're here for. If you're not a member, please also contact me if you'd like to know a little bit more about what we do, how we can help you. We try and help the business as much as we can. So yeah, so that's what we're here for, to be your industry body. And we hope you enjoy the Roadshow webinar today. I will now stop my screen sharing and my video, and I will hand over to Martin. Oh, hang on a second. I just have a question here, so I'll just see. What was the NECA email for the CPD points? Okay, so it is, I can just type this in and hopefully everyone can see it, but it is necasa.asn.au. But I'll write it in the questions and then hopefully everyone can see it. Okay, so that's my section done, and I'll hand over to Martin. If you want to unmute yourself, Martin, and then start your screen share, that would be great.
Okay, looks like I've got an issue there, Leo. I've got host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, I've changed that. Sorry about that.
That's right. So yeah, hopefully I'm sort of back on now. So thanks for that, Leah. So yeah, my name's Martin Wilkes. So I'm here to do a presentation for the SA Power Network Service Installation Rules for the 2020 presentation. So with the Service Installation Rules update, the service has been published and it's basically applicable from the 28th of February 2020, and the grace period ends 6 months later on the 28th of August 2020 for any technical changes. So we've got a summary in the front section of the service rules, and just at a high level, changes have occurred to the following sections. So section 1, 1.3, section 2, 2.9, section 4, 4.1, 4.7, 4.8, section 5 is 5.1, 5.2, 5.4 and 5.5. And so on through the list. But if you have a look in your service installation rules, you'll get an idea of all the other changes. On the left-hand side, there's some marks down next to each paragraph that's been changed. It might be as simple as a word or a full stop, or it might be that whole paragraph has been changed. So it gives you an idea to look where to look to see those changes. And if you need to refer back to the previous service rules, hopefully you keep a copy of those, then you can compare what the previous rules were compared to what the current rules are. So we've done a few updates with our service installation rules. Clause 7354 about access to point of supply, really regarding connection points for pits and pillars. We noticed that there's still some older designs out there that trip some people up now and again, and also our standard modern design. So we've sort of clarified this to help electricians and also customers sort of understand what the requirements are, basically for a work zone around a pit or pillar. So there's the primary work zone of being 1 metre by 1 metre. So if it's a green pillar, the fuse panel within that pillar faces back into the property, so that's the standard sort of work zone. We can have an alternative zone to either side of that pillar, depending on its orientation within the property. And then with the older design, in some cases there's been a fence that may have been installed over the top of the pit, and there may be issues with you know, which side is responsible for accessing it. It's fairly clear that each customer, whether it's lot A or lot B, you know, has their own clearance zone so that we can work on that pit. And it just basically comes down to you know, the time that we need to access it, that we'll obviously access it from the most safest side for the task that's at hand. In regards to unprotected consumer mains entry zone, when there's a gas box, we've tried to re-clarify some of the issues that come around with that have also been introduced with the gas requirements. So basically there's a 500 clearance between the gas box and a main switchboard with metering, which includes service fuses. And with unprotected consumer mains, previously it was only permitted to come up on one side of the meter box, or within 500 mil, but we've now included that to come up either side of that switchboard, so that it does give a bit more flexibility, especially with some of the blocks that have been subdivided into such small properties and not much real estate, especially when gas mains and electrical mains are trying to cross over just to comply with the left-hand side. So now we've got both the right-hand side. And if the edge of the wall is within that 500 mil, the consumer mains can actually come up that side, because it can go straight into that cavity within the 500 mil. There was no real difference between coming up on the front face to the left-hand side or right-hand side, so we've had that one included as well. With a meter main switchboard location on a side wall, so this is generally for a domestic installation, so we try to give a bit better drawing on where the main switchboard is to be located. So basically, as long as it's within 1.5 metres of the front facing wall, so part of the principal frontage setback, that should be fine. And we've reduced the height of the bottom of the box to being 0.5 of a metre to the bottom of the box and 2 metres to the top of the box. So with this indication is just generally that the meter box should be located within the shaded area when it's within a residential property. And also you've got to take into account the finished or actual ground level. In some cases that ground level may need to be built up for the time of connection, and then extra paving or landscaping that sort of happens after that time. We'll just need to make sure that it ends up at the correct level. For unprotected consumer main zone, we've had some issues, especially for larger properties where the pit pillar or transformer, etc., might be right in the front corner, but the house or building might be set back a lot further than the 10 metres. So we've tried to give it an indication that will allow the service fuse enclosure within 10 metres of the boundary and up to 15 metres in width, because we've had some properties that have been 50, 60 metres wide and had the building built on the other side of the property. So we're just trying to reduce the distance for unprotected mains for where it goes into a service fuse enclosure to be changed to protected mains. So the service fuse enclosure basically needs to be accessible 24/7 and not behind any walls or fences or gates, etc. with meter isolator exemptions, clause 7514 for the application, retailer or meter provider initiated sort of work. So if it's meter maintenance or a churn, so it's not initiated by the customer, there's no requirement to install that meter isolator, because obviously a electrician shouldn't be involved in anything like that. If it's customer initiated, so where it's remote metering and not within the same vicinity, so if it's within the same vicinity, it means within that same area, but if it's in the main switchboard is totally separate from where the metering is, then it doesn't need that meter isolator. For a type 1 panel as well with 3 service fuses, we've put an exemption there to actually change that main switch for a circuit breaker. So then that saves having to replace the whole panel or do a major alteration just to get a meter isolator on in that case. But the service fuses as well must be, access must be free from obstruction and available at all hours per clause 7422. And if it happens to be customer works for other reasons, consumer mains repaired, relocated or extended to a new connection point, they don't necessarily need a meter isolator. There will be certain circumstances that they do, but also if it's a reconnection after 12 months to an existing consumer mains and main switchboard, if there's been no changes to any of those and it's a straightforward reconnection, then there's no requirement to install a meter isolator. So with meter panels and meter isolators, we'll continue on with that. For a meter panel change, so where PV's being installed and the panel's being changed, then the meter isolator is required. If the consumer mains are being replaced as a repair, then the meter isolator is required. If there are extenuating circumstances, we can look at those as an individual basis, but basically if it's being replaced as a repair and can be installed, then that meter isolator needs to be installed, especially if the size of the consumer mains are being upgraded as well. And also if there's load control added to the existing installation capacity. 7515 installation, so a meter isolator can be installed on the existing panel provided it's in a serviceable condition, it doesn't contain asbestos and it meets the minimum space requirements to apply and remove a meter isolator padlock. So we've had some issues around this, so it's just a bit more of a re-clarification, and this clause basically lines up with 8.3.2 and additions that in the last edition was changed slightly. So basically where there's meter changes only, i.e. PV or meter maintenance, the existing masonite or timber meter panels can be used provided that they're in good serviceable condition. So we've got some examples, such as PV, adding a meter isolator and metering. So timber panel, metering only. If it's in good condition with sufficient space, which this one has, then there's no requirement under SA Power Networks to change that meter panel. But a meter provider may subsequently request that a modern hinged panel is installed, and SA Power Networks accepts this condition. Because for a meter provider to make their life easier, they don't want to have a board that they're trying to hang off and putting stress on cables, and a lot of other issues with the larger boards or some of the boards that are out there. So if a meter provider does require that that's hinged, then that just becomes their requirement then. So for PV, if you're adding a meter isolator or metering, where there's a asbestos panel, so it's full, basically the main switchboard plus metering, something like this needs to replace the enclosure in a compliant location. As we've had some issues where only the meter provider's been involved and an electrician goes into the site and pulls the service fuse, which is in breach of the Electricity Act, does all their work and tries to get it as an upgrade at the same time as replacing the meter panel. So we've got, this is the example of what happened at one of the sites. So the meter panel with the switchboard was just pulled off, and they've just put a new panel and screwed it to the original frame in that switchboard. So that's not really the intent of getting the site upgraded, as well as just replacing an asbestos meter panel, so it becomes a full upgrade in that sort of case. So no, it is an alteration. So something like this would have to be submitted as an alteration, and then everything can get rectified and the appropriate metering gets installed at time of the alteration. Another meter panel replacement for PV. So in this instance, there was quite a few issues with the site. The original meter was overhanging the old timber panel, so that wasn't suitable. It looks like the old switchboard was replaced a number of years ago. They might have got it from a second-hand store, etc. But if you have a look at the meter, it's a two-phase meter, but the switchboard's only got a single-phase main switch and then another single-phase switch for hot water by the looks of it. So they've tried to do this just as a meter panel change, but no, this one should be the same. This is basically should be completed as an alteration and you know, rectified from there. For PV only, where there's no room for the meter isolator, there's some instances where there's metering and service fuses, so there's no physical room to install the meter isolator, but there's a main switch on the switchboard. We can apply with in the service rules, we've actually got the exemption or exception to that rule, provided that the service fuses have unrestricted access 24/7, then the main switch can be changed to an appropriately rated circuit breaker for load control. So something like this can be completed when the meter provider is on site, as long as there's no other changes, or via a alteration of service provision so that we may need to attend. So it can be done either or way. For another one where there's no room for a meter isolator and there's no main switch, again the service fuses must have unrestricted access 24/7, and an alteration of service request is to be raised. And the main switch needs to be installed as a meter isolator, so that can be added. There may be cases where we can look at other alternatives, but the first thing for something like this is that there's no single main switch. Every circuit breaker on there is basically as a main switch, so that a separate main switch has to be installed. So whether that's directly before the meter as a meter isolator, or if we need to have a closer look at the job and apply a further exemption from there. So service installation rules is out now. It's been published for a few months now, so hopefully everybody's up to date with the latest version. And for any contact, just please contact our general inquiries and support on our inquiries line of 131261. They can pass on any information to myself or our other standards group if required, or any other department. For any email inquiries, it's as simple as customerservice@sapowernetworks.com.au, and for our faults and emergencies, 24/7 131366. All right, thank you.
Martin, there's just a question here for you.
Yep.
You see it, the questions, or do you want me to read it to you?
No, I'll just read it out. Incoming service location for unprotected consumer mains if there's no gas box. Will this still be required to be located directly under the meter box? Thanks. Yes, so basically unprotected consumer mains, if there's no gas box, then they have to come up vertically from the ground into the enclosure that contains the service fuses. So whether it's a separate service fuse enclosure or a meter box that's got a service fuses in it.
Cool.
Sorry, Martin. I've got a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind, while you got your slides up.
Okay.
If you can maybe punch back to your slide where we're showing the 500 mil exclusion zone around our gas meter box.
Yep, that one. No, gone too far. There we go.
Yeah, that one there. Now, just if you could possibly confirm for me and everyone else, a lot of people are requiring a lot more space in their switchboards now when they're installing other sources of supply, such as generators, solar, batteries. And in doing that, they may require a larger switchboard. Now, if someone is to come along and replace a switchboard that is, one brick away from the gas meter, are they required to now install their larger switchboard 500 mil away from the board, or can they utilise that distance that was already there, provided they don't go any closer?
All right. So yeah, this is one that we had some conversations with the APA group about. So because it was an existing installation, even if the meter box was a combined meter box with the gas box, or if it's separated by a brick or two, that as an existing doesn't force them to try and move it 500 away. But it was more a case if the meter box was, say, inside or at another location and wants to be moved near the gas box, then the 500 would apply, the same as a new supply, basically.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. And just the next slide across.
Yep.
Right here we have a switchboard, and you're stating that the bottom of the switchboard has to be no lower than half a metre high.
Yep.
What about a ground mount switchboard?
Yeah, so this is basically as a meter box located on a side wall. So the intent there is so that it's pretty well at a standard height for a type 1 or a type 2 board. If it becomes a ground mount switchboard, then it's basically the bottom of the meter panel area, and the general switchboard is within that half a metre up to 2 metres.
So the meter panel, what you're saying, the bottom of the meter, so meter readers can access it, or are you saying the entire panel?
Yeah, so well, basically, if it's a freestanding board, then it's the entire panel. But it depends on the circumstance of that sort of board. So if you sort of took a standard type 1 or type 2 board and freestanding mount, that basically the intent is the bottom of the box is half a metre off the ground, so that somebody that's working on it isn't sitting on a low stool to do any work.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
There's just one more question, Martin, for you.
Okay. Is there any current rules or regs for the main earth electrode to be at least 500 mil from the incoming consumer mains? Thank you. So with that, there is a requirement in AS 3000. It might be one that the Office of Technical Regulator can confirm as well, but it does say in AS 3000 that there needs to be 500 mil between a earth electrode and incoming consumer mains.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think I might just double check on that one anyway with Peter Lister, because I think that question was more around the water pipe rather than the consumer mains anyway. So there's
all right, yeah, I'll jump in there, Martin.
Yeah,
the 500 mil it's actually an APA requirement that any source of ignition or potential source of ignition has to be at least 500 mil away from their meter box. So the 500 mil is in relation to 500 mil away from their gas service and their meter box. It's not a 3000 requirement. 3000 has specific requirements in distances from other services when them other services are metallic, and they range anywhere from 100 up to 500 mil, I believe. But it's only other metallic services.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. All right, thanks for that, Peter. Yeah, there's also another question came in. You know, can I get a hard copy of the service installation rules? So yeah, if you call our builders and contractors or our general inquiries line, and they can organise for one to be sent out to you.
Excellent.
Right, thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Martin. We will issue those slides out to everyone because the SA Power Network slides are not in our roadshow handout, so we will send them out electronically to everyone. So I'll hand over now to Alex, who's going to talk through the Technical Regulator slides.
Thanks, Leah. I'm just sharing my screen now. We all seeing that good?
All good.
Okay. Okay, so just because I'm not in front of a crowd tonight or this afternoon, I'm unable to really introduce myself as what I normally would. So my name's Alex Cools, for those of you that don't know me. I'm a Technical Standards and Safety Officer with the Office of the Technical Regulator. I'm also here this afternoon with my colleague Pete Lister. Essentially what I'll be doing is just presenting the presentation, and he's here to back me up purely for the sheer volume of people we have here this arvo. What we're going to go through this afternoon is just a little bit about a product recall that's been issued quite some time ago now. Really some common breaches that we keep coming across. Stuff that we keep putting in regulation roundup and trying to get out to the industry as much as we can. However, we still unfortunately come across them. A little bit about batteries. They're becoming quite popular now, and even if you don't work with them, you will come across installations with them. Some testing of hazardous voltages for shock reports and shock investigation. Some recent enforcement action that we've undergone. A couple of public warnings that we've unfortunately had to issue. Some DER requirements if you're involved within solar and exporting, and just a few standards updates. So the first cab off the rank in this presentation is a recent recall that we've undergone on DLE RCBOs. Now there were a few issues with these, and it was brought to the OTR's attention that some of these RCBOs weren't operating correctly. So after further investigation, we found that there were some issues with the certification of these products. They weren't properly certified. And we also ourselves performed some tests in a laboratory and found that these RCBOs weren't compliant in a number of ways. So really what we're trying to tell the industry is you don't have to be Superman, as per se, and go and replace these every time you see them. What your responsibility is as an electrical worker or contractor is to let your customer know that they're not compliant. And the best way to do that is obviously on your certificate of compliance. And once they're made aware, they're now responsible. So under the Electricity Act, the owner is responsible for their installation. Once you've made them aware, look, you might get a switchboard upgrade out of it. However, you've done everything that you possibly can. It's now their responsibility to change them over. So if you do come across them, make sure you let the customer know. This is probably the most common breach that all of us find when we're going out and performing our audits. And it's something that is even in our apprentice presentations when we undergo them at RTOs. What we constantly find is we call them apertures, however, they're more commonly known as openings in a switchboard aren't sealed correctly. Now what can happen in a switchboard, you can have a fire, and then the fire can then escape out of that switchboard, either up the wall cavity or out to other parts of the building. and it can actually engulf the entire installation. There's a good example there in the top photo. You can see this is actually the inside of a house. So imagine the gyprock's been burned off the wall. There was a fire. It's then escaped out of that switchboard and gone up the wall cavity and engulfed the entire premises. So if the slider on that board was pushed across, or someone filled it up with some fire foam, or had a bit of fire-rated insulation that's pushed in the hole, or a pillow, or something simple like that, the fire would have been contained in that switchboard. And then there's just a little photo underneath it as well to making it one that hasn't caught fire. How simple it would have been to just seal that hole there. Another issue that we commonly come across is guys that don't actually read the instructions. And I've got that underlined. When you purchase a product to install, that product's gone under some pretty rigorous testing and certification. The person that's designed that product and is now selling it has spent thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars on testing and certifying it to be installed in a specific manner. If you do what this person's done in the top photo, where they've just made Swiss cheese of this IP rated enclosure and then put a PK screw there, when quite clearly there underneath it is a perfectly good fixing hole that they could have used and then put the pip in it, obviously you've impaired the ingress protection of this enclosure. It's no longer what it's been designed to be installed as. So really we would fire that as a breach. And then the second photo there is just a solar inverter. And this was actually about 6 meters high up on a shed wall. It was about a 23 or 24 degree day. I remember it was a beautiful day. But once I was up the top on a mezzanine floor, it was sweltering up there. Now this inverter was switching on and off constantly because it was going in overtemp. And in the manufacturer's installation manual, it gives actually specific clearances for the inverter. And right here, we're hard up against the isolation. And it was very hot there, and it's obviously not going to function as intended. So 3000, clause 171C, talks about the manufacturer's instructions when installing products. Another one that we come across, and it's quite unfortunate, is when installations have been livened up when they shouldn't have been. And we get a lot of this in the commercial and domestic game, and it's generally due to the fact of site pressures. So the builder or the painters, or I'm not pointing any fingers, but generally someone on site wants light or they want power so they're able to continue their work. And if we look at the first photograph there, the light bulb's obviously on, it's energized. There's actually no fixing holes. So the electrician has energized this light without even actually trying to fix it to the roof. We've got live parts there. If a painter comes along with his brush, sticks his brush in there, or his finger or his tongue or whatever he wants to stick in there, he's quite potentially going to receive a boot. And much the same with the bottom photo. Again, you can see that there's no fixing holes there. So he hasn't actually tried to even mount that to the wall. The electrician's gone through the installation, he's energized everything, which he shouldn't have. He obviously hasn't tested accordingly. So these are going to receive expiations, these jobs. And expiations mean paperwork, and I don't enjoy paperwork. Something that we're starting to come across quite commonly now is obviously solar, batteries, generators, other sources of supply. Now those sources of supply require a main switch. So a solar supply main switch, inverter main switch, etc. And 3000 talks about the requirements of main switches, and they all actually have to fall under that. So in this scenario, if we're looking at here, this switchboard's actually compliant. But if we look at the meter isolator there, the meter isolator, let's say, is just within 2 meters. So we're compliant because that's considered as our main switch here in South Australia. We look at our top DIN, and there's no main switches there, so that's compliant. That's outside of the 2 meter exclusion zone. However, if we're to install a solar down the track, or a battery, or a generator, or any other source of supply, we're going to have to put a main switch somewhere. So generally it's going to be in that top DIN. And a lot of guys, when installing that, forget what they're installing is actually a main switch. So we have that problem, and we also have the problem of the guy who's installed the switchboard in the first place. So even if you don't do solar or batteries, when you are installing a switchboard, try and think about future works, and think about the poor solar installer that's going to try and figure out a place to put his main switch. This here is purely for the solar guys, and it's unfortunately a pretty common breach that we find, and it's guys not sealing the entry of a switch disconnector. Now that switch disconnector could be on the rooftop, or it could even be down on the ground. Or it could be 300 meters away. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the opening of that conduit hasn't been sealed correctly, and it's under the panels. So yep, rain's not going to get to it, but we still possibly have the opportunity for condensation to enter into that enclosure. And for those of you that work with solar would know that water is our enemy in a switch disconnector. Therefore, that's why we need to seal the entry points of our DC enclosures and switch disconnectors. So AS 5033 talks about how you can do that, and they give in one of their clauses that it can be achieved by appropriate glands. So in this case, a multi-hole gland would have been the way to go. And it also states that you can't achieve it by silicon. So it doesn't matter how much silicon you push into that conduit, it's not going to make it compliant. I guess before I go on to the next slide as well, we can't obviously rely on plastic cable ties as a primary means of support under solar modules. There's no standard for cable ties, so these could be the most expensive ties that you can find. They also could be the most cheapest ones you can find. So we need to have a little bit more than that. This may look a little bit confusing at first glance. However, if you stand back and have a little bit of a look at it and let it soak in, it's quite a simple single line diagram that we have here. What we have is we have a main switchboard, which is feeding or getting fed by a multimode inverter, which is otherwise known in the industry as a hybrid inverter. We also then have some energy storage, so i.e. our battery feeding that multimode inverter. And we have some standalone circuit breakers, or sorry, RCDs, which then go out to our standalone loads. First up, we really need to make certain that we're not putting an RCD on our multimode inverter. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The main reason being is we need to maintain neutral continuity through to our standalone supply. The reason for that is if we take out our neutral, our MEN is in our main switchboard. So potentially we've lost our MEN, which is not good. The second thing that I need to reaffirm is when you are installing a switchboard, a standalone switchboard or standalone supplies off of a multimode inverter, those standalone supplies have to be on RCDs. And the reason for that being is when we're getting fed from our, let's say, engine-driven generator, or from Sapin or Cal Electric, or wherever you're getting fed from, the amount of available fault current that we're going to have there is incredibly high. It's going to be enough there to operate our protective devices within the required time. If we're getting fed by a battery, a small little battery on the side of someone's home, we're potentially not going to have that fault current available. So an RCD is required to put in. We have also put a little note on here, this slide as well, just to be aware that if you don't deal with batteries, not every setup is just like this. There's quite a multiple of different arrangements that you can have. However, this is generally the most common of what we find. When you are installing a multi-mode inverter and you have to put RCDs on the standalone circuits, a big issue that guys tend to trip up on is what type of RCD is required. Now, I haven't written it in here, but AS 4777 Part 2 actually mandates the manufacturer of the inverter to show or tell the installer what type of RCBO or RCD to be installed. They'll mandate it has to be a type A or a type AC. Once you then have that, because you've read the instructions, you can then install the correct type of RCBO. You can see here two RCBOs that look exactly the same, but if you look a little bit closer, we've got a different type of diagram here. Now what this one here is telling me is this one can handle a little bit of DC injection, which is possible across a transformerless multimode inverter. Now if we're getting DC in an RCBO of a type AC RCD, there's a big possibility that this might flood the coil and inhibit its operation type. So it's pretty important to know what type of RCD to install on your output. Right here we have just a couple of photos of a battery solar again. However, you could probably take this into account for a number of other things. It could be a gate controller, it could be an air conditioning interconnector. At the end of the day, there's an industry term for this type of cable, and everyone calls it data cable. Now 3000 doesn't really talk about data cable. It talks about communications cable, and it talks about different cables of different voltages, but not data. Now it's not a communications cable because it's not connected to the telecommunications network. So the way we see it then is it's a cable that is of a different voltage type. So there's three different ways that you can make this compliant. And what we've got here was we have a cable in close proximity to some single insulation, and it's only rated for 30 volts. So that's not compliant, hence the big X. So there's the three different ways that you can achieve this is by double insulation. So if this cable was double insulated here, this low voltage cable in the back of this switchboard, then we might be okay. Or this cable here can be insulated for the highest voltage present. So there's a pink cable getting around. I can't mention the brand, but it is rated for the highest voltage present. Or we could have it in a separate compartment or barrier or conduit. So we could have conduit coming hard up against this RS485 label all the way back to the other Modbus connection or what have you on the other side of the appliance, and we could be okay. So that's also another possibility out of this. Just to extrapolate a little bit on that, guys, stripping back the sheath on this cable is also another issue. Let's pretend it wasn't, but let's pretend that this cable is rated for the highest voltage present. What is done here or she isn't compliant. The internal of this cable hasn't been rated for the highest voltage present. And it's quite easily that it could bend over and touch this low voltage single insulation or flick out possibly and even touch the live conductive parts. Now whatever this is connected to isn't rated for that type of voltage, so it's not compliant. So he could have easily have tied this all up and then laced it or had it in a bit of conduit or a bit of rated heat shrink. There's a few different ways out of it. Another thing that we commonly find is guys installing things inside of a switchboard. Now, again, this is an example of a solar battery type meter arrangement, but it can be taken into account for a number of other things. It could be an irrigation control, it could be a monitoring device, it could be some lighting control for some tennis court lights with a contactor. There's many different things in there that you require an RCD for. So the circuit protecting this metering device isn't a consumer mains. It's not a sub-mains. It's a final sub-circuit. And 3000 says that all final sub-circuits in a residential application have to be RCD protected. So the guys out there installing these types of things in switchboards, just because it's within the switchboard, it doesn't mean that it's exempt. This is a great photo that I took quite some time ago now, last year. I wish I actually took a step back and took a photo of what was next to it. It was actually right next to a pool as well. Essentially, what we're trying to get at here is if a inverter, or I should say an electricity generation system, is in a damp situation zone, it's not permitted. And this is just an extract of AS NZS 3000, table 6.1, and it's showing zone 0 through to zone 3 is not permitted. A common question that we get probably at least 3 or 4 times a week, guys performing shock reports or getting weird voltages off of things. And the first question we ask is, what type of meter are you using? And it's generally the wrong one. Now in this instance, one of my colleagues has just set up a USB charger, plugged it into a power board, and he's finding that he's getting 44.32 volts on that USB charger. Now, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty certain that's higher than the amount of voltage that you'd be able to feel and could be an issue. If you notice, the meter in this situation is actually on volts AC. So we should be getting the voltage that we're trying to measure for, right? Then if we pulled out our wigger, we'd find that we would be getting 0 volts. That's because the wigger is actually putting a bit of load on the circuit, and it's getting rid of what we call that ghost voltage, as per se. So if we flick the meter to our low impedance on our meter, this meter actually has that availability. It then gives us a different story. So we're measuring for the exact same thing, we're measuring for volts, however, a different type of meter now, and it's telling us that we've got 0 volts. And this is really important when we're performing shock investigations, someone's been hurt or injured, because we can get put off the scent, as per se, if we're utilising the wrong meter. A lot of electricians, every time we do these roadshows, and it is a shame that we're having to do this webinar this year in this manner, because I do miss meeting with electricians. But a lot of electricians are always quite upset, and so rightly, that of electricians, of homeowners performing their own electrical work and finding lots of dangerous work in roof spaces, and what are we doing about it? This is just a slide, and I'm not going to go on too much about it. On average, we're actually taking enforcement action against around 3 homeowners a week. I think it's probably more than that. So just something to be aware about. We are trying to do something about it. A recent prosecution that we actually had in conjunction with Consumer Business Services, it involved a William Zachary Cook and a Matthew James Tonkin of Tonkin's Electrical. They installed a solar on the house, and they actually had to perform a switchboard upgrade so they could fit in whatever was required for the solar. William Zachary Cook actually entered the SA Power Networks service pit. He broke the seals on the meters as well, so we could remove that panel, install a new switchboard, and then put the new meters, well, the existing meters, I should say, back on that panel. In doing that, he actually transposed one of the actives. It was a 3-phase property and a neutral on the meter. And if you know a little bit about the MEN system, it is actually connected to our earthing system. So what he's done there is he's then livened up the earthing system. So everything metal in that house has become alive. Taps, sinks, earth appliances, fridges, etc. Luckily, the homeowner actually had wooden floorboards, so when he touched his sink, whilst it gave him a heavy-duty blow, it wasn't enough to throw him to the ground. However, when he went outside and touched his garden tap, it was a different story. So, long story short, the homeowner then contacted both the Cook and Tonkin, and they neither of them actually returned to the address to fix the fault or further investigate the fault. So he rung up SA Power Networks, and then SA Power Networks then put it onto us. So penalties wise, William Zachary Cook, and I believe we've added his middle name because there is more than one William Cook out there who was an electrician. So just remember that. So William Zachary Cook was disqualified from being licensed as an electrical worker until he completes some retraining, and I believe he has done that. And in addition, until the commissioner considers him to be a fit and proper person, which I believe they still haven't decided that yet. So he's unfortunately still out there licensed. Matthew James Tonkin, who was actually the principal contractor as he saw it, was reprimanded and fined $8 grand. Now, the situation that these two had was Matthew Tonkin believed that he was the he didn't have any part of it because he was subcontracting William Zachary Cook out. Well, it's not exactly how Consumer Business Services saw it. There were things that were taken into account, how he was provided with materials and a van and whatnot. Therefore, they saw Matthew James Tonkin as equally as responsible. So just a reminder to those guys out there who do subcontract people, you're not exactly out there free of anything. So just a reminder there. This is a solar job that we found, and I've already shown this to a lot of solar installers. However, I think it's important that we show it to you guys because it's how we ended up giving out a public warning. This here is a solar, and for those of you that don't know, solar within the confines of a building has to be in heavy-duty conduit, and this is not. If a rodent or something is to walk along these timbers, it's going to start chewing on these. DC is a funny beast. It's going to start arcing and sparking, and then maybe catch fire. So this is not right. In addition, we also don't have any earth coming out, which is normally the point where we'd run our earth through. So this wasn't earthed. So what we did was we actually asked this individual contractor, his name is Lario Brazovic, to go back and fix it up. So we did. And this is what we found. So red tape is not heavy duty conduit. In addition, he's actually earthed it, which is good because not having earthed modules can be quite serious. However, he earthed it to a piece of CJ conduit that he found in the roof space with some tape. And to make it even better, that piece of CJ conduit was actually just floating in the roof space. It wasn't actually earthed. So that and many other reasons was why we unfortunately had to issue a public warning against Lario Brazovic of Adelaide Connections and Electrical. So if you ever come across any of Lario Brazovic or Adelaide Connections Electrical work, please let your customer know that there is a public warning out against him. Every certificate of compliance that he did do on the electrical system, we did notify the owners. However, there could be installations out there prior to our electronic ECOCs. So have this printed out in your van, ready to go. If you come across a solar installation, you know that Lario's done it, because then you may get more work out of it for one, because you get to go through that installation. And I'm pretty certain you'll find some issues as well to help out the customer with their unsafe installation. Solar's always the one where we find guys having a lot of trouble. This was another public warning that we've issued, and it's quite some time ago now. We've had to wait a bit to do this presentation because of COVID. But we can see here that he hasn't earthed it. That's just flapping in the breeze there and going back to our DC cables, not in heavy duty conduit. This was another installation as well, no earth. And not in heavy duty conduit, just sitting on the metal framework. Not cool. So again, we had to unfortunately issue a public warning against this individual. The commissioner of CBS actually suspended his license as well. So he's no longer licensed in South Australia. So again, print this public warning out. These public warnings, if anyone wants to know, are available on our website. So print them out, have one in your glove box, ready to show your customer if you do come across one of his installations. Again, you might get more work out of it, but more importantly, hopefully you can make an installation that may be dangerous into not dangerous and compliant. Just a couple of standards updates. So the wiring rules actually had an amendment for anyone that is not aware, and mainly the amendment was mainly fixing up some grammatical errors. So lots of full stops and commas, ends and ors, sentences that you read and kind of you could read in two different ways because the editors didn't really quite think about it when they went through it. So a lot of that's been fixed up. The only real thing that actually has been added in that amendment is clause 4.1.5, air extraction system. Now that's anything that extracts air from your household or factory or whatever. So let's talk about just a bathroom IXL Tastic or a rain chilled above a cooker. All of this are air extraction systems. Now, what the standard is actually telling you that you have to do is when you do install an air extraction system, you actually have to make the owner aware that they have to get their flues inspected by a competent gas worker, or the standard says a competent person. The reason for that, and I'm not a gas expert, but the reason for that is it can upset the flow within a house, or pressurization, or whatever. So if you do have gas appliances such as heaters or cookers, this can cause a problem apparently, and quite a significant health problem. So they've added it in the standard. So it's a bit of an odd one, where a part of your responsibility is to recommend to the customer that they have to get something done without, once you've performed some work. However, it has been added in there, so just something to remember. New battery standard, so AS 5139. For those of you that are working in that field and been living under a rock, it is coming out. We did send out a reminder to everyone in the industry. So everyone that's ever performed a solar installation or a battery installation, we did send one out to ECOCs. And it will become mandatory as of the end of next month. Now, in the standard, it talks a lot about clearances and where you can and can't put your battery. And that's generally about it. However, you do need to know it because we are going to start enforcing it. A lot of your battery solar installations will still have to adhere to 4777 and 5033. But if you are doing batteries, you really need to get this standard in your hands, and you probably should start using it now as well, because we will be on the warpath enforcing what the standard requires in about a month's time. Transportable structures. I've had to change a couple of these slides, and probably just a reminder to anyone who wants to pick up those, while I think about it, those booklets from NECA. When you do pick up those booklets, obviously some of the dates will not line up because we had this presentation ready about 4 or 5 months ago. So I have had to change a couple of things in it. However, public comment has closed last week on transportable structures. They've actually got part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is the part where, say, a caravan park or the Royal Adelaide Showgrounds or something where people can park their floats, horse floats, and plug them into the power heads. So part 1 talks about that, and part 2 actually talks about the van itself. So the caravan or a temporary construction site, offices, canteens, etc. So if you are doing that type of work, it is pretty important that you get your hands on that standard when it comes out. So keep your eyes peeled for that. 3010. We've spoken a lot about 3010. So I really don't think I should go through it in too much detail this year. They did recently just publish an amendment to that standard. It's still a bit hard to follow, I will admit, and a lot of the figures probably where they were supposed to make things easier have quite possibly made them more difficult now. The amendment didn't change too much. It just changed a few of the diagrams that were a little bit incorrect in regards to neutral switching, MEN positions, etc. So it didn't change too much. Look, if you're still having trouble installing generators, there was a massive rush there when we had our statewide blackout. But if you are still installing them and you have any queries on the standard, I recommend that you probably just contact us rather than me going through another 10 slides of generators again. AS 3012, construction and demolition sites, was published on the 4th of the 11th. So we have a 6-month honeymoon period, as per se, in South Australia. So that 6-month period is now over. So you need to be following that standard now if you do any temporary construction or demolition sites. A couple of really cool examples of what I've been finding out there. The first photo there is of a construction site where obviously that cable is not adequately supported. So that would be in the non-compliant bin. The second photo there is a temporary electrical wiring system that's been mounted to a temporary fence. Now the standard talks about that as well. So if you don't do construction wiring day in, day out, there's some pretty simple things that maybe you just might want to get your head around. Do not mount temporary wiring to a temporary fence. If emergency services or a bricklayer or whoever wants to come in, 9 times out of 10, they're just going to try and lift a couple of those shackles and move that fence open so they can get the vehicle in. If there's a wiring system attached to that fence, they're now tampering with the wiring system. This is one that I come across where this is actually his fix-up. The cable was actually, or the conduit was laying on the ground. And I don't know if you can notice on your screens or not, but this is actually a gate. To make things even worse, there's actually a padlock here. So what I did is I actually asked him that he either needs to bury it in the ground or raise it. So he's popped down the Bunnings and he's got some tomato stakes and he's raised it off the ground for me. Again, still not compliant, not exactly what I wanted. Now on to the exciting stuff. ECOC and the AEMO DER register. As of the 1st of December last year, network operators such as SA Power Networks in this state need to collect information about DER. So that includes solar modules, inverters, batteries, anything that you're installing that's going to be a distributed energy resource. Now, in most states, you actually have to perform different types of paperwork, fill in the different form. I have heard stories of apps, and also I've heard stories where you actually have to pay to fill out that information as well. What we've done here in SA is to try and make it as streamlined as possible for guys who install this type of stuff, is we've actually added it on our ECOC form. So a lot of actually guys have been upset with having to add more information on the form. It's actually out there to help you guys, believe it or not. Once we've got the information, we then send it to SAP. So, I mean, if you're doing solar, you've probably done 100 of them. But what you do is you see job type and you see solar battery inverter generator, click on that, and then it allows you to lodge the DER, to lodge the information to the DER register all in one place, all on our COC system. No other forms, no other apps. We've tried to minimize the amount of details required. If you look at what details AEMO actually wanted from us, it was incredible. So we've actually tried to minimize that as much as possible. And you can enter the details if you want. There are a few different drop-down boxes, so you can actually enter the details if you want. However, I don't know why you'd want to. And that's why there's actually a few new pieces of information, such as inverter serial numbers, etc. So if you want to know any more information about that, it's not actually something that we regulate as per se, it's actually AEMO. So if you got your mobile phone in front of you or something, you want to actually take a photo of those email addresses, those will be the ones that you need to contact. If you have any more questions, you can actually email our OTR ECOC address, which is otr.ecoc.au. SA Power Networks TS129, which is probably the most common technical standard that solar installers would have to follow, has mandatory inverter settings. And what they're saying in there is you have to increase the maximum voltage to 258. That's what the network operator requires in this state. And you have to enable volt, var, and volt watt mode. A lot of people are ringing up asking us how to do that. The answer is contact your manufacturer of the product that you're installing. They will be the ones that will tell you how to enter those details. By doing this, it actually increases the hosting capacity. So by doing this, we can install more solar on our grid, essentially. More solar means more jobs, means greener power, everyone wins. So by being lazy and not clicking that enable part when you are programming your inverter is actually hurting your business. So that's something to remember as well. It also increases grid stability as well. It stops our grid from falling over on a really sunny day because there's so much solar being pumped into it. In the next revision of 4777, it'll actually be mandated as well. So just something to be remembered by. However, if you are installing on the network, it's mandated by SA Power Networks. Another slide that I've just added the other day is actually quite a rare opportunity at the Office of the Technical Regulator. We're seeking an electrical technical standards and safety officer. We've had a lot of guys that do know about this, trying to search for it in I Work for SA or Seek, and they haven't been able to find it. And the trick is you have to actually search for the job title, Electrical Technical Standards and Safety Officer. Do not search for Office of the Technical Regulator. It won't actually show up anywhere. My job is really cool. I get to go out and work with SA Police, CFS, MFS. I get to do presentations. I get to work with apprentices. I get to deliver industry information. I can sit on phones and talk to other contractors. I'm out and about all the time. It's a really good job. So if something like this interests you and you really want to put into the industry, I do ask you to apply. A couple of things that are essential. One of them is an electrical license, which I would have thought would be obvious, but you need to have an electrical license, okay? So please do not apply for this if you don't have an electrical license. Another one is a driver's license. We need you to get out and about, obviously. You can't just sit you're off at your desk. And experience is essential as well. If you're a day out of your apprenticeship, I'm sorry, you probably need a little bit more time out there before we'll probably have a good look at you. Just if anyone's, again, got your mobile phones out, I would take a photo of this screen. Then you have our phone number. I really encourage you to give us a call at any time. Well, not any time. We're here 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, from 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. We answer any questions. We get some real sticky ones where all of us will have a good chinwag about and eventually come to a conclusion with, I hope. And we also get really simple questions as well that we can answer straight away. So if you ever have any questions about how close you can put a PowerPoint to a sync all the way through to something very complicated, we're a very, very good free service, if you ask me. Give us a call and we can help you out. Probably just something to be made aware of as well. We unfortunately have to have daily meetings now every morning at 8:30 a.m. So if you do ring at 8:30, you're probably not going to get anyone. So maybe wait till at least 9 or 9:30 at this stage while we're in this unfortunate health pandemic. So that's it from me. I'm just wondering if we have any questions, Pete, do we? Heard you typing over there.
Yeah, I think Pete's been answering them as we go.
I've covered them all off as we've gone along, so
I might just give it a moment. If anyone wants to type a question, I might be able to answer it to everyone. No, I've put everyone to sleep. All right, well, that's it from me. Again, if you have any questions, give us a call. Thanks, Leah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Alex. I might just retake over the screen if you don't mind. And just put my details up in case anyone needs to contact us. Oops. So yeah, thank you very much for attending, everyone. Really appreciate your time. I hope you got a lot out of it. And yeah, thanks for adapting to the webinar and everything. Like I said, we have recorded this, so if you need to come back to it anytime, we will upload it for everyone to view on our website next week. So stay tuned for that. Further information, there's my details there. So yeah, take a photo of it if you need. If you've got any questions about tonight or you need to get in contact with the other presenters and you don't have their details, please contact me and I'll provide those details to you. I will send out the slides as well. And like I said, if you want to grab a copy of the handout, we have quite a few copies in the office that are not going to be used. So yeah, feel free to pop past and pick one up. So there is a couple more questions for you, Alex. I'm not sure if you want to answer those
So
now.
the first question we've got here, Yeah, sorry, that must be a follow-on question from you, Pete, that first one. The second question is, what is happening with inverters being shut down during the day? Very good question, very common question that we're getting at the moment, thanks to the 7:30 report. At the end of the day, we don't have any control over this, and there's only thoughts, they're only ideas at the moment. There's not actually any, we don't even know how it's going to be implemented yet. There's possibility that your inverters could be shut down. There's possibilities that your inverters could be ramped up, ramped down, required for the requirements of the grid stability, essentially. It's either that or the grid knocks over and we all lose power. Nearly every single house has solar now, and that amount of power that's being pumped out into the grid, let's say on a Sunday when all the factories are shut, all the workplaces are shut, and it's a sunny day, so everyone's out down the park or having a fish, that power's not being used. Something has to be done, and we're seeing it all over the world at the moment where people are having real issues with this. So unfortunately, we have no control over what's happening with that, and we're not exactly certain on how it's going to happen. So I hope that answers your question.
I think that's a sort of an SA Power Networks question too. So, but I think you've answered it pretty well, Alex. In fact, you've got a nice little compliment here saying you are excellent.
Looks like I owe someone a beer.
And there's just one last question about, is DRA labelling compulsory now?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of exactly what DRA labelling is. Give us a call tomorrow.
Okay.
It's a bit hard to answer a question with a two-line question, if you know what I mean. If I'm talking to someone on the phone, or one of my colleagues is talking to someone on the phone, we can then get a little bit more information on exactly what they're talking about, and then obviously be able to answer that.
Yeah, no worries. There is.
Yeah, now all the questions are coming through.
Yeah.
Demand response mode. Yeah, no. So again, give us a call tomorrow, Ron. Would the clearance apply to meter box or gateway? The 500 mil clearance is in regards to any ignition source. So it could be a power point, could be a solar inverter, could be a switchboard, any ignition source, anything where a bit of a spark can happen and blow up the place.
Beautiful. I think that's getting a few good compliments here, so that's great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that, the feedback.
And again, sorry, Leah, just to reaffirm, just make sure if you are picking up the booklets that you've printed out, that I'm sure you've got 1,500 sitting there, you lucky thing.
600, yep.
If you do get them, our slides have been slightly updated. So just to make you aware, they obviously were printed quite some time ago.
Yeah, they were printed back in March, so just be aware. I will email everyone who has joined today a copy of the current slides. And I just want to make note as well, just a couple of things that Alex referenced in his presentation. All those updates to the standards, like 3012, 3010, obviously ACE 3000, all of those are on our technical knowledge base, which members get free access to. So yeah, all the amendments are made, pretty promptly after they're released. So you'll get the latest updates. So if you haven't used that yet, please send us an email and find out your login. We highly encourage it. It's a searchable technical forum where you can. There's about 10 Australian standards on there. In fact, we've added in the 5139 battery standard as well. There's the service and installation rules on there and a range of other technical information, and it's all searchable. So if you're not already using it, highly encourage you to do so, and you can get logins for your staff as well. So and also with the DER register, NECA did quite a lot of work with AUMA on that, and I can confirm that South Australia has the best process in the country. Every other state, like Alex said, you had to pay extra or do extra paperwork and everything. So pretty proud to be in South Australia the way that it's been handled between SAPN and the OTR and AEMO has been fantastic. So we're really happy with that. I think there's a couple more questions coming through, or maybe it's just feedback.
Yeah, no, most of it's feedback. I have got one guy asking, can the manufacturer's inverters supply a way to install the volt via standards rather than the solar installers trying to extract this information? That's a really good question. There's no way that we can enforce manufacturers of what to put in their installation instructions. Generally, it's the better stuff that you buy will have really good instructions, and maybe the sort of less expensive stuff will not have good instructions to follow. That's always going to be the case. It's like buying flat pack furniture. You're going to have a real fun night or a really difficult night. However, I will say that 4777 are looking to mandate, I had been told by my colleague, they're looking to mandate that volt VAR settings will be enabled on the inverters for them to be sold in Australia. So it's already in the pipeline, as what I'm trying to say here. And I think the rest of it is feedback.
No, there was just one more. When I change an inverter for an old solar install, do I have to earth it?
Okay, so there's a guide on our website in regards to changing over solar panels and changing over inverters. The answer isn't a yes/no answer. You could be changing a transformer inverter over to a transformerless, or changing a transformer with a transformer. But you need to have a look at our fact sheet on our website. So when you get some time, just Google PV fact sheet, SA Gov, and hopefully that page will take you straight to our website where you can find that information.
Excellent. So that looks like everything's been answered. So yeah, any further queries, if you just want to contact myself or the OTR or SAPN directly, and we'll work those out for you. Once again, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for your great feedback. And we look forward to seeing you all in face-to-face seminars next year for the Roadshow. But maybe we'll run a webinar as well next year, just for those people who can't make it to the face-to-face ones, do a bit of a hybrid. And yeah, hope you all have a great evening. Once again, please contact us if you've got any queries or anything at all, if we can help.
While we've got everyone, sorry, Leah, just to cut you off there. If anyone has any negative feedback, I think would be beneficial as well.
Yes.
Were we too early? Did we start too early? I mean, 4:30. It took a lot of consideration into if that was a good time or not. Things like that, because as Leah says, we probably will be doing this again. Yeah,
definitely. We're not going to replace the face-to-face, so we're always really keen to see our members face-to-face. But yeah, it might be that we run a webinar as well, you know, just for, like I said, those people who couldn't make it. So yeah, really keen for your feedback, constructive criticism, or praise, or whatever you've got. Like I said, it's the first time we've run a webinar, so it's all new for all of us. But yeah, we just appreciate you taking the time, and yeah, thanks so much to Alex and Peter from the OTR and Martin from SAPN for all their work and their support. And we'll see you guys really soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks, everyone.